So this is the next workshop in the 2025 New York State World Languages Professional Learning Series. My name is Candace Black, and I'm your World Language Associate in the Office of Bilingual Education and World Languages of the New York State Education Department. We want to welcome you to this wonderful webinar, which we're going to describe in just a second, but this is task design and sequencing to promote growth from checkpoint A to checkpoint B. Well-designed communicative tasks play an important role in promoting students' standards-based learning and continuous proficiency development. In this session, the presenters will share strategies for crafting interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational tasks in a cultural context around a thematic focus. Participants will learn how to design tasks with the performance indicators in mind and how to sequence tasks to optimize input and scaffold output to promote students' progress from novice to intermediate proficiency. Our presenters today constitute our 3/4 of our dream team. We have Dr. Joanne O'Toole, Bill Heller, and Dr. Lori Langer de Ramirez. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to invite Bill, Lori, and Joanne to begin this webinar.
So this is Joanne, and I'm going to get started. And again, task design and sequencing to promote growth from checkpoint A to checkpoint B. First, we want to advertise the upcoming webinars that are planned for this fall. Tuesday, October 14th, if you are a classical language teacher or interested in classical languages, we have classical language culture standards from definition to integration with David Pellegrino. Tuesday, November 18th, we will be back with Do I Still Teach Grammar? The answer is yes. Situating grammar in proficiency-based instruction. It's a question we're often asked, so we want to be able to answer it. A wonderful webinar on Tuesday, December 2nd with Rebecca Aubrey, who has previously presented for us. Ask Me a Question. The focus of this webinar is preparing our learners to be askers of questions. One of those really key tools moving our learners from novice level proficiency to intermediate level proficiency. And our final webinar of this semester is preparing teacher candidates for professional success, the World Languages Methods course. That said, anyone is invited, not just methods instructors. We also want to invite you to have your voice heard at the State Education Department in relationship to the New York State Portrait of a Graduate. It has been defined, but it's been defined in broad terms. They're looking for additional feedback of what it looks like in implementation. And heaven knows, our field can play a very important role in this implementation. So there are links here to where you can enter your thinking in the thought exchange. And if you happen to be a member of NYSEFELT, they have been putting out information as to some potential ways to respond that would be meaningfully understood. So here are the webinar symbol keys you've seen a million times, keeping your microphone muted. Think alone if you see the thought bubble. Right in the chat box, you'll actually only see that on their final slide. We do ask for no attempts to chat, although I do believe the chat is turned off today, until the end, and then we will take any and every question that you would like to ask us. And as Bill has already put the link to the handouts folder in the chat, and he will continue to do so, there is content, and you'll see that little yellow folder icon on the slides that identifies content you'll find in the handouts folder. So we have 3 goals for today, starting with I can identify the progression of elements of proficiency from checkpoint A to checkpoint B. And I can analyze and compare the performance indicators of checkpoint A with those for checkpoint B. And I can analyze tasks that enact strategies that scaffold proficiency development for interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational communication from checkpoint A through the sublevels of checkpoint B. But before we get into all of that, I want to take a little bit of time to offer you some context, some background information. You may be asking yourself, what is a task? So let's dig in. First, there are two types of language practice that scaffold learners' readiness for tasks. The first is an exercise, and we'll define exercise as language practice that has no communicative purpose or meaning-based context. So let's look at some examples. We might ask students, conjugate these four verbs in the imperfect tense. Match these vocabulary words to their translations. You want to think about these like individual puzzle pieces. They're all going to be able to be put together with other puzzle pieces at some point in time, but right now they're individual and they don't come together to create anything meaningful. An activity is language practice that has secondary attention to communicative purpose and a meaning-based context. So, for example, write 5 sentences about what you used to do for fun as a child, using the chapter vocabulary and the imperfect tense. So we can see here that teacher is very intentional on making sure they use particular vocabulary, particular grammar, but they did put it in a meaningful context. So it's kind of like bringing together our puzzle pieces, and they're starting to take shape. So now let's look at a task. In contrast to an exercise and an activity, a task is a communicative act with primary attention to making or expressing meaning in a real-world context or a simulated real-world context using one's own linguistic resources. Those resources one has developed over time. So we'll see some examples here. Interpretively, identify traditional Spanish children's games. Identify is our language function, and the traditional Spanish children's games are meaningful context. Interpersonally, ask a friend what they used to do for fun as a child and react to what they tell you. Ask and react are two language functions in this task, and we again have a meaningful context, what they used to do for fun as a child. And presentationally, compare what you and your friends used to do for fun as children with what children in Spain traditionally do for fun. We see compare as our language function. And again, we have that very similar meaningful context that brings together what we learned from both the interpretive and interpersonal tasks. What you and your friends used to do for fun is compared to what children in Spain traditionally do for fun. With all of this meaningfulness front and center, our puzzle pieces have now come together in a particularly meaningful sort of way. So in summary, a task has a communicative purpose and a real-world or a simulated real-world context. A task can be initiated in the interpretive mode and can be the culmination of prior scaffolded activities. And a task asks students to carry out the communicative purpose of the real-world or simulated real-world context using a language function associated with a mode and using vocabulary associated with that context. But we have to situate these tasks in cultural contexts. And to do that, we need to start with an authentic resource. So I want to share with you that the Authentic Resources information sheet for New York State World Language Educators has recently been both updated and expanded, and you will find it in the folder. And you'll find it particularly useful for being able to identify an authentic resource and consider how to apply it. So I want to go back to my interpretive task and show you the authentic resources that I identified. So remember, my interpretive task was identify traditional Spanish children's games. So I put an authentic resource search term in Google, my friend, Juegos Tradicionales de Niños en España. And one of the things I came across was this website, Juegos Tradicionales y Populares para Niños, traditional and popular games for children. And by the way, for people who don't speak Spanish, my search term was traditional games for children in Spain. When I got to this site and started looking through it, I discovered a table of contents. And clicking through the table of contents, I counted, and yes, I did count, more than 80 different traditional games played by children in Spain in all of these different categories. Thought, oh, what an amazing resource. I couldn't bring 80 different games to my students, so I would have to make some choices. So I'll show you some choices I made. I decided La Rana, the frog, would be a really good one. I've heard about El Sapo in Colombia from my friend Lori. And so I'm like, in Spain, they have La Rana. Well, I think it's the same game, just kind of changed names as it moved from one continent to the other. And so what I found on this resource was this text. But this text doesn't really bring the game to life. So I went out and I looked a little further. Not that I wouldn't use this text, but I would enhance this text. Look what I found. I found a visual of the game itself. It was actually on a website where they're selling it. Then I found a blog of somebody who reflected on all the games that she played as a child in Asturias, Spain. And here's a drawing that she did, an illustration she did of her and her friends playing this game. So our students can start to envision it. And then I found a TikTok video of a man who is selling this game, but he's also informing people all about it, its history, and how it's played. So, what a really robust way to have students come to know about this particular children's game. And another one that really jumped out at me was Las Chapas. Again, lots of text in the website, so I went hunting for additional authentic resources, and I found a photograph from a school of kids playing this game on the playground. I also found a video of a tournament happening for children playing this particular game. Really neat video. And I found a video of parents teaching their children this game. So the bottom line is we can really bring our tasks to life through finding robust, authentic resources. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to tell you what task design I decided to use. Instead, I just want to remind you about a resource we shared with you a couple of years ago, pre, during, and post strategies for interpreting authentic resources. And we put this in the folder for you again. If you've forgotten about it, haven't used it lately, you're going to find pre-interpretation, during interpretation, and post-interpretation strategies in multiple categories and a glossary that defines every one of them. And also looking ahead, you're going to want to be thinking about what are some strategies I could use for task design interpersonally and presentationally. This is a new document that we're rolling out at today's webinar called Strategies for Interpersonal and Presentational Task Design. It starts with key consideration for output-based tasks, strategies for interpersonal task design, and a glossary of all of those tasks and some ways to scaffold and support interpersonal communication, followed by 3 more sections: strategies for presentational task design, a glossary of these presentational strategies, and some ways to scaffold and support presentational communication. So we invite you to download it, take a look, and hopefully this will support your implementation of tasks. So you may be thinking, but I have to use a textbook. So let's take a look at what that might look like. First, you're going to take a look at your textbook content and ask yourself, is it an exercise? And I'm not saying don't ever use exercises, but they don't bring us to enacting the standards. They would be a first step, perhaps, or something that students do outside of school to really get to know the vocabulary and the grammar. Is it an activity? In other words, does it have a primary focus on form, vocabulary, and grammar, and a secondary focus on communication? Or is it a task that has a primary focus on communication? Once you've identified the nature, then you know what your next steps are. So here is an example that comes from a textbook, and the directions are, and I have it in English below: narrate the story of this little girl and her grandmother. Complete the sentences with verbs in the preterite or imperfect according to the context. And what we see is narrate. This is a language function. We see it right in the presentational communication standard. We also see a plausible context: a little girl and her grandmother. We also see the primary purpose is to practice the past tenses, the preterite and the imperfect. So what we can identify this as is an activity. So let's take a look at this. How do we move from that activity to a task? Again, the activity could be a scaffold. So here's a possible task. Tell the story of something memorable you did with someone special in your life, not presuming a particular relationship. When was it? Where were you? Who were you with? What did you do that made the experience memorable? And the very first thing that we see is we have tell the story, another way of saying narrate. So it's a presentational language function. It's personally meaningful, and the learner is going to basically define the context based on the story they want to tell. And the primary purpose is communication. But that might be too big a leap for my students. So let's take a look. We might want to consider an additional scaffold. We already had the activity with the fill in the blanks, but now we can look at this with a different kind of scaffold. In this case, I'm showing you a graphic organizer. And in this graphic organizer at the center, I have a memorable experience. That's what the context is. And telling a story and using the 2 past tenses, and this is specific to Spanish, but I know this applies to many other languages. The when, the who, the where are the setting, and those would be told in the imperfect. And the what, this happened, then that happened, then the other thing happened, would be the preterite. And so this graphic organizer guides students through the decision-making processes in relationship to the content and the grammar that they could then start on the graphic organizer and then make into a story, the task from the activity. So that again was really just to give you some background knowledge, some context for what we're about to take a look at. And again, we talked about today's session being very much about the proficiency target progression from checkpoint A to checkpoint B. What does that mean for category one language, 1, 2 languages? It means at checkpoint A, our students' proficiency targets were novice mid to novice high. And at checkpoint B, in that first year of study, intermediate low is our proficiency target. And the second year of study, intermediate mid. For category 3, 4 languages, we have the same checkpoint A proficiency sublevels, novice mid to novice high, but novice high continues into checkpoint B and moves the learners to intermediate low. So we're going to take a moment to look at the performance indicators, a document that we've been working with since the standards were rolled out. And again, the performance indicators are located in the folder, the handouts folder. And what we see over at left for interpretive communication are the descriptions for checkpoint A at novice mid and novice high, at checkpoint B for intermediate low and intermediate mid. Let's take a little bit closer look on the next slide. At checkpoint A, in terms of interpretive communication, we expect our learners to be able to identify topics, basic facts, and familiar questions and statements. But we want to scaffold our learners' ability to move to the interpretive tasks of identifying topic, main idea, and key information. Interpersonally, here again, we see the performance indicators for checkpoint A and checkpoint B. And now let's look more specifically at checkpoint A. Interpersonally, we can expect our learners to be able to use memorized words, phrases, simple sentences, and questions, mostly memorized. But at checkpoint B, we want to scaffold their ability to create sentences and strings of sentences and to ask follow-up questions. In terms of presentational communication, again, we see what the performance indicators identify. And a closer look shows us presentationally at checkpoint A, our learners use words and phrases and simple sentences. And our goal is to scaffold their ability at checkpoint B to create sentences, to use series of connected sentences. We also see a shift in comprehensibility. At checkpoint A, they're able to be understood by those who are accustomed to engaging with language learners. At checkpoint B, however, those who can understand them well are accustomed to engaging with non-native speakers of their language. So checkpoint A is really the teacher. Now we can start moving beyond the teacher in terms of how well they can be understood by others. And one of the things we see in terms of our culture standards is we're moving our learners at checkpoint A from being able to solely identify to checkpoint B, where they can describe. And why describe? Because now they can create with sentences. And of course, all of this new language capacity is in relationship to the themes and topics. And as you know, we have 4 topics, or excuse me, 4 overarching themes. We have 17 topics in total at the 3 proficiency checkpoints. And so what's new at checkpoint B is the addition of 3 topics to the 13 that were at checkpoint A. At checkpoint B, we have entered earning a living in the theme of contemporary life, the arts in the theme of science, technology, and the arts, and environmental issues and sustainability related to the theme of global awareness and community engagement. So I love this quote. We've read it to you many times, and I'm going to read it one more time. Instructors need to target instruction across 2 ranges. broadening learners' performance at their current range and working to develop some abilities at their next higher range. And so the instructional design being comfort and stretch. Comfort we put in blue because blue is associated with our novices. And that's where we're starting as we start the implementation of checkpoint B. The novice level language proficiency our learners have brought with them from their previous year of study. And now we're stretching them into checkpoint B at that intermediate range, which we often associate with the green. I am now going to turn this over to my colleague, Bill Heller.
Thanks, Joanne. So in this first section of tasks that we're going to present, Lori and I will be offering some ideas for helping our students across the bridge from novice high to intermediate low proficiency, which occurs during the first year of Checkpoint B for Category 1 and 2 languages, and during the second year of Checkpoint B for Category 3 and 4 languages. Summarizing what Joanne reviewed from the performance indicators for each standard, here are 5 fundamental progressions that we can facilitate for students through the way we design our instructional tasks. They are moving from asking formulaic questions in Checkpoint A to creating original questions in Checkpoint B at the beginning of Checkpoint B. From identifying the topic in authentic resources to beginning to identify the main idea. From understanding formulaic expressions to understanding sentences. From responding to questions, just answering and responding, to initiating conversations. And then from using formulaic language to creating sentences. So let's take a look at each one of those. The first bridge to cross is from asking formulaic questions to creating original questions. This task begins with an interpretive task using an authentic video. So our setting is level 2 French. Our unit theme is interactions. Our lesson focus is humans interacting with animals. And our context is the French singer Plumes singing to animals and recording their reactions. So we start with this little screenshot from one of his videos. So our previewing task begins with having the learners interpret the screenshot. Let me play for you this short video clip with Plume singing in English for the benefit of our multilingual audience here in the webinar today. But the other video linked to the left, and the link will be in the PDF that you can find it, has him singing one of his original songs in French to monkeys. So French teachers can have an authentic resource en français. But let's take a listen to see what we're going to be talking about here.
Cause if the whole world was watching, I'd still dance with you. Drive highways and byways to be there with you. Over and over, the only truth. Everything comes back to you. You still make me nervous when you walk in the room. And butterflies that come alive when I'm next to you. Over and over, the only truth. Everything comes back to you. And I know that it's wrong, that I can't move on, but it's something about you.
There he is singing along. So the first part of the previewing task is to show a screenshot from the video. Pairs of students generate 5 questions that they want to have answered when they watch the video. Then one pair joins another pair to pose the questions they've written to make hypotheses about the video. So what might that look like? So in part one, pairs of students compose questions about the screenshot. Here are some questions they might ask. Who's the man with the guitar? Why is his guitar pink? Why is there a penguin with the guy? What's the penguin doing? Where are they? These are questions that the students would generate based on the image, studying the image alone. Then the previewing task continues. Again, this is before we watch the video with the students. One pair poses the questions to another pair to make hypotheses about what happens. So they might hypothesize the guy's a veterinarian, or the bird likes pink, or the man works in the zoo in Paris, and the penguins like to sing. Later in the lesson, after viewing, here's a second strategy we can employ. So they view and verify their hypothesis. Now they're given a short article about plumes from the online source 20 Minutes. This interpretive task employs a second strategy to help students practice creating questions while engaging with an authentic texts. So we have the students supply the answers to 6 questions and challenge, or you supply the students answers to 6 questions and challenge the students to compose the questions, kind of like Jeopardy. So here's an example of the questions you would get, or the answers you would give them, la réponse. He is specialized in giving concerts for animals. And the question would be, what is his audience? What is the particular audience of plumes? The answer would be, he visits zoos and animal parks. Where do Plumes' concerts take place? And he wants to sensitize or activate, raise awareness of people, among people, showing them that animals are as sensitive as human beings. What is the goal of his work? Would be the question that the student would write based on that answer. Now Lori will offer some suggestions for more strategies for crossing that first bridge from novice high to intermediate low.
Thank you, Bill. I don't know if I can top singing penguins, but I will try. So taking a look at the move from identifying a topic to identifying the main idea in checkpoint B in year 1. So this piece of realia of authentic material is for level 2 Spanish. The unit theme is Todos usamos el agua. We all use water. The focus will be on the use and misuse of water by humans, the environment, and industry. And the context is this infographic, which provides quantitative data about the uses of water in Mexico. So our interpretive strategy to interact with this authentic material is to project the image of this public service announcement minus the title. We're going to ask students to make predictions, and there's our language function, about the title for the image that conveys the main idea. So moving away from a topic, we're asking students to then create a title that helps them to convey main idea in this infographic. Some possible students' responses could be, ¿Cómo usamos el agua? How we use water. What do we use water for? Water and the environment. The water in our community. Water is important for everyone, or for everything, and wasting water. So here's an example of using a material and taking away that title and helping students, scaffolding the creation of a title to convey main idea. Let's have a look at the movement from understanding formulaic expressions, so much a part of what we do in checkpoint A, to understanding sentences. And again, this is for checkpoint B, year 1. This is level 2 Spanish. The unit theme is living a healthy life. The lesson focus would be on healthy ways of living. It could include food, exercise, friendships, and mental health. The context is a collection of sugar packets that I came across in Spain this summer and couldn't resist. Took them all home with me. They provide truisms and inspirational quotes. Who doesn't need inspirational quotes on the back of their sugar packets? So here again, we're moving away from formulaic expressions to understanding sentences. Our interpretive strategy with this authentic material would be to give students copies of the authentic resource, not the original sugar packets that could go awry very quickly, and asking them to identify the ones that they agree with, or things that or think are true, or ones that resonate with them by circling them. So let's say they choose these two sayings. One is, life always offers you an opportunity. It is called today. These are the pithy kind of sayings that kids love, right? And then no one is responsible for your happiness, only you. So let's say these are the two that resonate with our students. And we might then move to an interpersonal strategy. They've each chosen from this selection of sayings. And with a partner, they can ask each other to compare the sayings, or ask the students to compare the sayings that each one chose. Again, here's the language function of comparing, and students can have a conversation with that goal. Possible student conversation might look like this. I like saying number 2. I think there are many opportunities in life. And then student B could say, I agree with you, and I also love saying number 3. I think that I am responsible for my own happiness. So I can imagine some really good conversations coming from this. And again, we're moving from understanding those formulaic expressions that we use in our checkpoint A work and getting them to understand sentences that are relevant to their lives. Here's another example, and this one is moving from responding to questions. Again, so much part of checkpoint A. We're constantly asking our students things and they're responding. But now we want them to get to initiating communication, so starting that conversation. This is for level 2 Spanish again. The unit theme is mis cosas favoritas, my favorite things. The lesson focus would be sharing preferences and favorite things. And the context is students learning some new greetings from some authentic resources, and these icons are going to be used to prompt conversations. Let's have a look at what this might look like. We might start with an interpretive task. This is a TikTok video, which is absolutely fantastic, and it is a person demonstrating 18 different typical greetings in Colombia. We're going to ask students to listen to those and to identify the ones that they would most like to use in their conversations. Let's say they use ¿Qué más? And ¿Cómo vamos? As 2 examples. Next, we would move into an interpersonal strategy, and this is inside-outside circles. Earlier, Joanne shared with us that strategies document, strategies for interpersonal task design. I highly recommend having a look at that. That's the one with the lots of different task designs that you could use. This is one of them. So if you're not familiar, inside outside circles is putting your kids in an outside circle, 2 equal groups facing each other. There'll be an inside circle and an outside circle. So that every student has a partner. The inside circle stays in place while the outside circle moves. The outside circle greets their partner using that greeting that they have just learned, which is a little bit of memorized language. Remember, we're still moving them from checkpoint A and getting them stronger, but we're going to give them more greetings to use than maybe they have had in the past. So a little bit of memorized language. They're going to greet their partner, and then they're going to ask them about their favorite things based on the icons. And the icons are just to generate their thinking, to get them to think, what is your favorite food? What is your favorite animal? And of course, the inside circle responds for a time until they get to move around. So let's look at what this might sound like in a typical possible student conversation. Student A might say, ¿Qué más? ¿Cómo estás? Hey, what's up? How are you? And student B will say, good, I'm okay, and you? And then, great. Hey, what's your favorite game? And student B might say, oh, I love video games. ¿Cuál juego te gusta a ti? Which game do you like? And then student A could say, well, I like chess. And this could continue. Student B, oh, how interesting. What's your favorite sport? And then student A, me encanta el baloncesto. I love basketball, and so on and so forth, using the icons to generate those ideas and keeping the conversation going as they gain new interlocutors as that outside circle continues to move. So again, moving from just responding to questions to starting that conversation. How do we scaffold that for students? And then this one is moving away from formulaic language to creating sentences. So now we're again looking at level 2 Spanish. This is the first year of checkpoint B, and students are learning about art in this unit. El arte es para todos. Art is for everyone. The lesson focus is about curation, how we curate, explain, and display art. And the context is all about museum labels. So here we have this museum label that provides audience with important information about a work of art. And here's an example of a museum label. Here we might have students looking at museum labels, having a look at different ones for different pieces of art, and ask students to choose a favorite piece of art and explain the main elements of the image for a museum label. So once again, they're going to choose an image. For this example, I have chosen Dali, which has been an area of interest of mine recently. And so they're going to choose, of course, The Persistence of Memory by Salvador Dali. And the product would be students creating sentences about this particular piece of art. So here's a presentational writing task where students are moving from that formulaic language that they've learned and memorized and recycled to creating some new sentences to describe this new piece of art. With that, we're going to move now from checkpoint B year 1 to checkpoint B year 2. And again, this is for category 1-2 languages. Those are the examples we have for you today. But remember, we're moving from intermediate low to intermediate mid in year 2 for category 1-2 languages. For category 3-4 languages, they're moving into intermediate low. So moving them along the proficiency pathway, these are some of the things that we want to help get them to be able to do. Moving from understanding sentences to understanding short passages on familiar topics. From creating original questions, which we just saw us working on a little bit, to asking follow-up questions. From initiating those conversations, remember we did a little bit of that with that inside-outside circle task, to sustaining conversations, keeping them going. How do you keep that dialogue going, that conversation going? And from creating sentences to strings of sentences. So you can see we're moving bit by bit, solidifying what they've already been working on, the level that they feel that comfort in, as Joanne mentioned, to the stretch. We're going to stretch them just a little bit, just enough to that next level. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to my friend Bill again, who will give you, oh no, I'm not, sorry, I'm going to give you one more example and then Bill is going to take over. So for checkpoint B year 1, remember we were talking a little bit about understanding sentences, moving from kind of smaller chunks of language to sentences, and now from sentences to short passages on familiar topics. This example is for level 2 Spanish. The theme is vivir una vida sana, to live a healthy life. The lesson focuses on healthy ways of living, again, food, exercise, friendships, mental health. That was the unit we chatted about earlier. And this article lists 10 simple things we can do to be happy every day. So this is an infographic with 10 different bits of advice, and these are secrets for finding happiness. Again, another topic that our students find really compelling, especially in this day and age. So our interpretive strategy would be for students to interact with this short, authentic article, we're going to ask them to identify tips that they have tried, always relating to the student's life, and have them classify the tips in order of importance to them. For an interpersonal task, students are being asked to describe, again, those language functions are in bold, describe their lists to each other. Then they can exchange opinions about which steps are most effective or helpful for them. Let's see what this language, this interaction might look like. So this is a possible student conversation. Student A might say, oh, secret number 3 and 9 are most important to me. How about you? And student B might reply, oh, I like number 2 better because gratitude is really important. It helps me a lot. And then student A might say, very interesting. How does it help you? So again, we're understanding those short passages, and we're also doing some responding as we have that communication back and forth about this authentic resource. And now with that, I'm going to hand it back over to my colleague, Bill, to share some other examples with you.
Thanks, Lori. So as our learners advance through checkpoint B and then ultimately into checkpoint C from the intermediate low level, we want to help them to move from creating original questions to be able to ask follow-up questions. Here's a task that can facilitate that progression following 2 different interpretive tasks that provide the setup for our interpersonal task. So this is for a level 3 French class. The unit theme is sustainable living, and our lesson focus is on consumer behaviors. And so there's 2 different graphics that they're going to read. They'll read an Oxfam France website on fast fashion, and they'll view a video about sustainable gift wrapping practices. Then students design and administer a survey about sustainable consumerism. That's when we'll get to the follow-up questions part. So their interpersonal task is to conduct a survey related to the unit theme. The first part will be as a class, the students will brainstorm questions that could be included in the survey about sustainable consumer practices. And then in the second part, you'll assign each question to a different student. And then before they begin to administer the survey, you'll have them generate possible follow-up questions to the question that they're going to be asking, that could be asked to gather additional data that will help them explain the results that they'll eventually report as part of a presentational activity. So the first part would look something like this. You'll brainstorm survey questions. Again, this would be done as a class. And then the class will, all the questions that are going to be structured such that they can be answered using the scale from always to never. Always, often, sometimes, rarely, never. And so they might be, do you use straws? Do you use straws when you have a beverage? Do you buy new clothing or throwaway clothing? How often do you compost the throwaway or the garbage in your house? And here's an English one. Do you use disposable gift wrap for presents? Then I would have them, each student would, once you got the whole list generated, each student would either choose or be assigned one of the questions. So here's the question, do you buy new clothing or throwaway clothing? So one student would ask that question to everybody, but then when they ask the question and get the answer on the continuum, then they could ask a follow-up question to get some more information. Where do you buy your clothing? Do you wear secondhand clothing ever? What do you do with your clothing that you no longer wear? And for you, is it important to be in fashion, in style? So you could ask those questions as follow-up as you're administering the survey. Another progression at this part of checkpoint B, from that low to mid level, is from initiating a conversation to be able to sustain a conversation. And in this sequence, we're talking about a level 3 Spanish class, and our unit theme is social media, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the lesson focus is on recognizing and combating disinformation. And the context would be where this would be situated in its unit would be after having debated the benefits and pitfalls of different social media formats. Students would interpret resources to detect and respond to disinformation, and using the infographic you see on the left. So the students would role play in this interpersonal strategy. Students would role play conversations exposing disinformation about rumors going around the community. Everyone who follows Facebook, your Facebook must have a community page where everyone puts their latest rumors, right? And so after studying this infographic on how to recognize disinformation on social media, then you're going to plant a rumor and have them have conversations about the rumor. So here's your rumor, and this one perennially comes up. The principal wants to make students go to school on Saturday mornings. So that's your rumor that they're going to try and talk about. So student one, you're going to role play the conversation. So student one is upset and is convinced this rumor is true. Student two is skeptical and tries to get to the true story. So detecting some disinformation here. So what might that look like? So to scaffold the conversation, the teacher might offer students a chat mat with helpful target language vocabulary. This is the version in English that can be found in the handouts folder. You'll notice that the boxes offer options for keeping the conversation going, including reactions, giving opinions, asking for more details, giving more information, and then connecting ideas as they converse this rumor about the principal wanting to have students go to school on Saturday mornings. Again, you would give this in the target language, of course. You just type over the English with your target language words. And then so that's how you would have the conversation, and they would use this as their support. Finally, the task, as students progress through the checkpoint, both their oral and written output stretches from single sentences to strings of sentences. And as they begin this process, hopefully, they'll be moving toward paragraph level discourse. So this strategy is for a Spanish level 3 class. The unit theme is inspiring arts. The lesson focus is sharing opinions about arts and artists. And then the context is after looking at the work of influential artists, writers, musicians, designers, actors, and other creative endeavors, students share their opinions about a creative work that inspires them in an online forum for classmates. So what would that look like? So in order to as a scaffold for preparing for this presentation, for posting on an online forum, they'll use a 5W graphic to create the first draft of an online review of an inspiring book, play, movie, artwork, concert, or performance. So they're going to be writing a review for an online platform. You can give them an anchor chart then to add details to their first draft, and then post the final review to a Google slide deck that they can share with their classmates. Here is an example of an anchor chart that you could give the students, similar to the chat mat that we used in the interpersonal communication. We can use this anchor chart to go from that graphic organizer first draft to a more polished second draft that they'll actually post to their online forum or their Google slide. And this gives some guiding questions at the top, along with vocabulary that can be included in the different boxes. Again, this example is in English. You would provide the target language on the reference you create for your students. And again, this English sample is given to you in the handouts folder as a Microsoft Word document. And again, hopefully this will move the students from creating single sentences to start stringing sentences together into a cohesive passage. And so now, reviewing our goals for today, I can identify the progression of elements of proficiency from checkpoint A to checkpoint B. I can analyze and compare the performance indicators of checkpoint A with those of checkpoint B. And then I can analyze the tasks that enact strategies that scaffold proficiency development for interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational communication from checkpoint A through the sublevels of checkpoint B.